So I guess that's a good time to pivot and talk about your family a little bit. Your husband is Persian, which I think is also really interesting because often when my parents have talked to me, in their head there's two options, right? I'm either marrying an Indian or I'm marrying like a white person. They've never really thought about me marrying someone from like
From
another
the Middle
immigrant
East?
culture. Yeah, or that too, yeah. So can you speak about that? Like any cultural similarities and differences? Like do you guys bond over being immigrants? How did your parents take it?
Oh my God, it was quite scandalous. Well, my husband is 5 years younger than me. We've been together for like 13 years. We just celebrated our 11th wedding anniversary, so it's been a while. But he is 5 years younger than me, and it was crazy. My parents were cool. My dad pulled some last minute drama, but it was very difficult from I don't know. I hope none of my Persian family is going to listen to it, but it's true. It was very difficult from his side of the family, I think. Now, of course, everything's different. I love my in-laws, and they're really great. But yeah, it was very difficult. I think Iranians are very cliquey, very, very closed, and it was so terrible. I kept being called like Indian. They kept that I was like this Indian girl, and like, why do Indians always do this with their food, and why do Indians put in so much oil? And so one day I was like, I'm not Indian. And it's really offensive to keep calling a Bangladeshi Indian. I was like, it's like saying Iranians and Iraqis are the same. And I said that, and everyone was like, and then my husband was like, how did you say that's so offensive? I'm like, it's so offensive. And then I said, hey, I have a master's degree. I can't deal with this kind of everyday racism. Forget it. Are you crazy? Like, what are your parents talking about? And then it was all like, oh, she's older. She's an Indian feminist, and she's going to be infertile. Like, it was crazy. I mean, anytime I joke with my mom, my mother-in-law, she's like, I loved you always from day one. I'm like, well, you did not. But my husband is such a great guy. So my mom was, right away, everything's great. My dad, everything was fine. Then he didn't understand why I had to have a wedding in America. And I'm like, because my husband's American. He's the first generation. Like, his parents came here in 1979, so he's first generation American. But my dad was like really upset that I had to have a wedding in America. I'm like, well, I do. I live here. He lives here. His family's here. And then we had a reception in Bangladesh. But the day of my wedding, after all my dad's like, I don't want to come from Dhaka for this wedding. Why is my daughter getting married in Washington? Why is my daughter who lives in Washington getting married in Washington? I said something because most Iranians are Shia and we're Sunni Muslims. And it really isn't a big deal to us, but it's a huge deal. Because obviously Sunni and Shias have like all this religious toxic history. It always gets it's so tricky. But my husband is very, very, very like religious in a spiritual way. So he was like, God is very clear that you're not supposed to divide the religion. And I'm like, well, I think the whole world missed that memo, Shai. So we kind of had to make up a Bengali Persian American wedding, which we did. But there's one big thing is the aqd, the Islamic signing part, which is very private for the rest of the world. We kind of do it with like just only, good family. With only close family and the mullah, the priest, whatever, the morning of the wedding. And for the Iranians, it's something you do at the wedding. And the whole aqd is like, it's like the centerpiece of the wedding. So I think I did a really good job, blending everything. I mean, the food was another really big drama at the wedding because everybody is a rice culture. So Iranians wanted their 5 rice dishes, and they kind of wanted to eliminate the desi rice dishes. And I put my foot down about biryani. I was like, if there's not biryani at my wedding, I'm not going to be there. But anyhow, so when I was explaining to my dad that the sofre aqd, for the Iranians, the Persians, they call it sofre aqd. It's like the big part of the wedding. My dad's like, what? He's a Shia? I'm not going. The morning of my wedding, I was like, Dad, he's Iranian. Of course he's Shia, but he's not really that into it. But the rest of Iran and the world is. It's very important to them. And for Iranians, being a Shia is a part of their identity, But anyway, we managed to get there. And then, I mean, it was a great wedding. It's been a great marriage. But yeah, it was very difficult. And now it's so funny because we're married and things are so similar. Farsi was the official language of the Mughal courts for 500 years. So there's so many Farsi words in Bangla, in Hindi. And of course, like culturally, now that we're raising our children, I mean, I think anybody that is non-white American has the same. We're like, please take your shoes off at the door. Respect your elders. But it's funny. It's funny to see. how much more similar we are than different. But in the beginning, no, especially I think with my in-laws, they were just like, what the hell?
So it sounds like after the marriage, like the next 11 years maybe smoothed out, you found
Yeah.
more of the similarities.
Oh, but I have some funny stories. Persian it's a difficult culture. You know, my aunt told me something really funny because I was like, God, most people have inferiority complexes, right? Persians have like a superiority complex. They really do. They're like, no, we're the best. I'm like, really? But my aunt told me once, it's so funny. She goes, they are the best. She's like, learn everything you can from them. So it's a very complicated culture, but I think it's probably one of the most beautiful. Like I'm so happy for my girls, you know, to have such a rich culture on both sides.
So, Anusha, I was actually curious about this because you mentioned that your grandfather, I think you said, was like one of the founding people in Bangladesh and stuff. So it seems like between that and then your husband's kind of pride in Persian culture, you really want your children to kind of absorb both Bangladeshi and Persian culture while growing up in America. So how do you navigate that without them feeling overwhelmed by having to absorb three different cultures?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard. It's hard parenting, and that's a really good question because it's actually coming up right now. It's happening like every day because yeah, I speak all these languages, and my husband obviously speaks Farsi, but we only speak English to each other. So English is the language in our house, and I have a huge complex about it, but I don't know what to do because I speak in Bangla to my parents on the phone, and I'm really not speaking Bangla here. And you know they hear Farsi all the time. So the Persian American community in Washington is huge. My in-laws are here, and we have like a really good. My husband's side of the family is very close with us, and they're here. Like my parents, they live in Bangladesh. So, but it's funny because I'm just so I have such a language complex. I'm like these kids cannot grow up speaking just one language, and I want them obviously to learn Bangla, but I feel like Farsi is more important. I don't want to overwhelm and confuse them. They only really hear Bangla when they go back to Bangladesh. I don't know what's going to happen post-pandemic when I can take them back again. I mean, you know, India is still like on fire, and so Bangladesh is just a muted version of that. So I got a Farsi tutor because I was like, here you can get a job at like State Department. You can do so many things when you speak Farsi, and then also you can practice it with your dad's entire side of the family. But I'm also like, she has to take Spanish at school, and then I had my younger one taking Mandarin at one point. And a really old high school friend of mine was like, hey, are you teaching your kids Bangla? I'm like, no, but I got, you know, this Farsi tutor. And she was like, God, Anushay, how can you not teach them Bangla? Like your grandfather died for it. And then I was like, I know, but it's just like, everyone's speaking English. And I was like, and I had to choose. And then I was like, you don't know how much this disturbs me because I speak 5 languages. And my high school friend was like, yeah, we know, Anushay. You don't have to like make your kids out be an overachiever. Just teach them one. So I really, I feel like they're very good though, you know, like they hear me speak Spanish. You know, my older one, Spanish is good. Before pre-pandemic, we used to go to Italy really regularly. So when we were in Italy, you know, they hear me speak Italian. So I hope, I hope by traveling and just by seeing, I think they're growing up how I would want them to, but I have a huge issue about the language. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, it sounds like Farsi is almost just more practical at this point. But outside of language, with food and these other things, are there other ways that they've kind of retained Bangla culture?
Yes, food is a really big way. Food, clothes, weddings, going to Bangladesh. They've been to Bangladesh, they've never been to Iran. I don't think they're going to be going there until the government changes. But food is a big way, and I feel like food is a really big way, but I mean it's painful for me to say this out loud, but my children cannot eat spicy food. And it has hurt me in a way I didn't know the pain could be that deep. I mean, ketchup is intense for them. I don't know how this happened. And my younger one, I felt like, oh, maybe. And even now she's like, she sees like anything like red or brown. She won't like eat it. And I'm like, you guys have to eat spicy food. So it's terrible. It's terrible. So I feel like we're doing really good on the food and the culture part. But if you can't eat spicy food and you don't enjoy a spice, you know, not, you know what it's like. It's not spice for the point of the spice. It's for the flavor and the experience. So